We are live, Deborah.
Okay, good evening. Call to order the Rockport Select Board meeting of October 13th, 2020. And we have a quorum. The first item on the agenda is a public hearing. So it's 5:30 and I'll convene the public hearing. The public hearing is to give interested members of the public an opportunity to comment on the amendments to the General Assistance Ordinance Appendices A to H, effective October 1st, 2020. I'll note that this item for action is in the agenda later on, but this is the time for a public comment. Do we have any public comment? Bill?
I do not see any, no.
And you didn't receive anything in advance, right?
Nothing in advance, no. Just to give the board an update on this, because I know Michelle is new to this. And this is Denise's second go around with these. So each year the DHHS, Department of Health and Human Services, in conjunction with the Maine Municipal Association, updates the maximum allowed amounts. That's what's in the appendices to the ordinance. The maximum allowed amounts for the basic needs for general assistance. So DHHS and Maine Municipal basically do a market review in each different area of the state, because these are all based on different areas of the state. Obviously, housing costs are different in Aroostook County than they are in Mid-Coast Maine or in Portland or York County. So as well as, oil prices and everything else. So they look at these on an annual basis and change the amounts basically to reflect those costs. If the board wish to not adopt the amounts that are recommended by DHHS, then we would need to do our own market study in order to do that, and then they would have to approve those numbers that we come up with. So just to give that as a general overview. And
5:32, and we don't have any public comment, right?
Correct. I just checked again.
Okay. So I will hereby close the public hearing at 5:32. And the next item on the agenda is the town manager's report.
Yep. So in your materials, I provided a 3-page financial report for the first quarter of this fiscal year, FY21. I just wanted to touch on some highlights of this. Of course, we generally should be looking at a 25% expense rate, if you will, although there are some things that are spent at a higher rate simply because of the timing of when the bills are due. For instance, insurance premiums, things like that. They may be due twice a year instead of once a year. But overall expenditures generally were at 21.49% expended. So we're a little bit under. Overall revenues are at 19.95% collected, which is pretty much in line with where you'd think we would be at this point. I will say that point out excise tax collections were at approximately $275,000, or about 34% collected for the budget year. So if you recall, we had adjusted excise tax revenue expectations down because of the pandemic, and that's not coming true. The collections are still strong, and this is even taking out about, I want to say it's about $32,000 that we counted as receivables. So that number is not in this number. So those are receivables that will get us to meet our budget number for last fiscal year. So we're still extremely strong with excise tax collections. Surprisingly, state municipal revenue sharing collections are at $78,000, and that's 36% of the budgeted amount. So that's a little surprising as well. Those do fluctuate greatly during the year. So I don't put any merit into the percentage and into what we've collected at this point, because that will fluctuate the next quarter. That we may be at 40%. There's no rhyme or reason when with revenue sharing collections. And generally, some of the revenue areas that are down are in the harbor, which makes sense, and in the Opera House. because of the pandemic, because at that point, again, we were guessing as to what might be able to open and what isn't, and what could open and what could not, when we were doing the forecast. So overall, I think we're in pretty good financial shape.
Bill, I had one question on the long-term debt. That item, we are 72.5%.
Yep.
Of our budget. Is that also like a front-loaded item that?
It is. Most of those payments are due in September.
Okay.
So that's why that is so high. You won't see a lot of payments going out for the rest of the year.
Okay.
Yep.
Hey, Bill, just one question too. It's a relatively low line item, but on animal control where it's almost 80%, what's driving that?
There's one payment that, an annual payment that goes to the shelter.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yep. So that's most of that budget. I mean, that's a $5,000 payment roughly.
Yep. Okay. That makes sense. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. The long saga of the Pascal Avenue Bridge light continues. So I have
There's actually two lights.
Yes, well, there were.
Right, and there should be.
Yes, and there's one that's on a pole that the pole is cracked. But anyway, so I've been communicating with the bridge manager about that, going back and forth, and he has been responsive to my emails. And the most recent email that I got from him actually today, he was on vacation last week. So obviously what he said to me today was the electrician will be taking down the pole, or somebody will be taking down the pole because it's cracked and it's dangerous, obviously.
Yeah.
But his response today was that because the bridge will be replaced in a couple of years, he didn't think that there would be any movement there. So I replied back, and I hadn't heard back from my reply, but my reply back simply was, I know that's not the case. The bridge isn't going to be replaced because it's not in the cycle. So what can we do to make sure we get lights on that bridge? So,
well, and if we're willing to pay for that,
right,
we're just trying to get their permission to do it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So hopefully I'll hear back from him tomorrow. I would think tomorrow or the next day. But we'll continue pushing them on that. So
I think you might be surprised at what the cost to the town would be to put a pole up and then wire it for a light. It's a fair amount of expense for a short period of time.
Well, we don't know how long. I mean, that bridge, we've been told for a number of years is
well, you're not going to be able to affix a new pole to the bridge, I don't believe.
Well, what we have is a base with bolts, and there's the other one is just like that.
And when that was put up, that was fine, but this is now, and the state may not agree with that. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. It's dark. I'll just say that in terms of safety.
Right.
But I know that when we were making decisions on the decorative street lights through the village, we purposely, part of the calculation was, let's make sure we save some money to get those bridge street lights in and done right. And they've sort of fallen by the wayside. And I really appreciate Bill sort of keeping after DOT on this, because I think we need lights on that bridge.
I don't disagree, and they've been out for 3 years,
Yeah.
So, but it's a matter of whether they'll let us put up a pole separate from the bridge. If that's the case, have at it, but it's still not going to be inexpensive.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's just I'll continue to update the board on this meeting.
Okay.
The town did receive a small safety grant from the Maine Municipal Association in the amount of $687. Basically, this is to cover 2/3 of the cost for purchasing 4 traffic control sign panels for the fire department. So I appreciate Diane. She generally writes and applies for these grants on behalf of the town, and generally gets them every time she applies. So it's always a good thing. Every little dollar helps. As you know, the town budgeted for an upgrade to its website during this fiscal year. And so Diane Hamilton has been working with GovOffice, is the software company we're using, which is our current software provider as well. What we've done is that she and I and other staff members had looked at several samples of websites that they've done that are updated websites with their new design, layout, new software. So we reviewed those over the past couple of months. And each one had its own things that we liked and some that we didn't like, and that sort of thing. So once we settled on a overall design, now Diane and I are working on finalizing that design for the web page. So I'm hoping that we'll launch the new website in November-ish. Depends on whether we want to put it up without all of the information on it, or whether we want to put it up after it's finally complete. I think I'm leaning, because our website is so difficult to use currently, I'm leaning towards launching it and then adding material as we can. So that's where we are with that.
Yeah, I
It
think,
is-
Bill, that just sort of witnessed how difficult it has been for residents to get to see what these ordinances are that are on the ballot.
Yeah, it's a very difficult website to try to put things in. It won't allow us to put links within text, for instance. You know, that's the type of thing that's very frustrating. The new website design is much more user friendly. It also will be automatically mobile friendly. So if you're looking at it from a laptop or an iPhone or whatever, then it will automatically size to whatever device that the user is using, which will be beneficial as well. So.
And Bill, while it's administrative and not policy, you know, in your province and not the boards, I do think it would be nice to share it with the board before it's finalized, so that,
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, if we have something to weigh in on in terms of, you know, the way it looks or whatever, I think that we should have the opportunity to give you that feedback.
Yeah, no, what we were trying to do was get the basic colors and that sort of stuff. And then we'll share the link so you can see the preview link. That's not live, obviously. But you can
I guess what I'm saying is I'd like the opportunity to see it before it's final, so that you guys don't come back and say, oh, well, it's too late now, it's done.
Yeah, no, that absolutely. Update on the library construction. So obviously we're in the middle of October now. I will say that once you get down to the last pieces of library construction, there's always things that come up, and it seems like it might slow for a day, then speeds up for a day. And so it's always constantly moving. So when I wrote this last week, there have been changes, obviously. So last week we had about 80% of the books have been moved from the temporary library to the new one and been on shelves, which is fantastic. It does actually look like a library. If you drive by and the lights are on, you can see books on shelves, which is nice. And 50% of the furniture has been moved in. We have remaining furniture supposed to be moved in, I think this week, if I remember correctly. And doing this, keep in mind, when the furniture has been moved in and the shelving and the books, FI is still working on the interior of the building, trying to get it finalized. So I just want to thank FI for working around us trying to move in, because that's not easy on them. You know, with us being in their way, they've really bent over backwards. So I appreciate that. The end caps and panels for the bookshelves, that's the last thing. They had to be custom made basically once the shelves were installed. So they had measurements made. Those are supposed to be installed the week of October 19th, so next week at some point. The lower level is moving along nicely and should have substantial completion by the third week of October. And then in a couple of weeks, the lower level furniture will be moving in as well. We are still waiting on CMP. Every time they come or are slated to come, we have an issue. Today, they were supposed to be here to finish installing the permanent power, and they had 5 guys that were out sick today, so they didn't have a crew to be able to do it. So they're supposed to be back on Thursday. So these little things just keep bumping a little bit, you know, back and forth. The intersection work continues around Lime Rock Street. Concrete pathways in Memorial Park were placed last week. Grading and curbs were also completed. This week, there should be excavation starting around the library building itself and on the Russell Avenue side, with curbs going in and the sidewalk after that. We will be leaving a section of sidewalk on Russell Avenue incomplete so that the landscaper can come in and not have to drive over the new sidewalk. So he'll have access to the site, and then they'll put the concrete in that spot once he's done. Paving is expected to be done by the end of October for the intersection. There were trees planted in Memorial Park last week. I think they were planted, Denise. I know that we had
Yep.
2 days going back and forth. These are the trees that were purchased from a donation for the Memorial Park. So we are moving forward with the project. I mean, we don't have an opening date at this point, just because there are so many little things that have to be done and taken care of. And we certainly want to make sure that the punch list items are completed once we get to that point, before the library is actually opened. When the CMP finishes the power, contractor has said it's going to take them 3 weeks or so just to test all of the systems, get all the systems hooked up. So we're already looking at sometime in November, I would think, by the time power is installed and the contractor can finish their work. But while we're all anxious to open the library, we're not going to do it in a hurry. We are going to make sure that the building is completely finished and ready to go before we do any opening. So,
and I think that, it's important. I know it's important to FI to point out that, FI has really been right on top of things all along and done their part on time. There are these other ancillary things that need to be done, and they can't control CMP. And so I'd just like to do a little shout out to FI for being so diligent and being on time for their part. And as you say, I think it's amazing that we're still this close, given what all we've had to deal with in 2020 with COVID and so forth.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. Update on wastewater from several different angles. As you know, part of the infiltration and I&I study that's been done previously, there was some camera work done back in 2014, and that wasn't for the I&I issue, but it was for just checking on the system. There were 1.1 miles of pipe that were inspected. And then in 2016, there were 2.3 miles of pipe that were inspected. Just to give you an idea, there are 17 miles of pipe in the system. So there hasn't been much done for viewing the pipe, the internal pipe. With the budgeted amount we have in the wastewater budget this year, we can probably get about 2 miles of pipe inspected. But that brings us up to about 5.4 miles, leaving another 12 miles of pipe approximately that still need to be inspected. I just wanted to give an update on that. The camera work should be beginning soon. Still waiting for the contractor to finalize the date.
Bill, we had hoped that Woodard and Kern would be here to do a presentation to the board and to the public on wastewater issues and options and so forth. But they weren't available tonight. But do we know for sure that they're going to be available at our next meeting in October?
They're not available on the 26th. They are in Fort Ken or Presque Isle someplace. But I've got them hopefully on November 9th. I've asked them to check their calendars for that.
Well, I hope so. I mean, I don't want to be last on their list all the time,
No, it's just unfortunately, obviously they cover a huge part of the state if they're in Fort Ken or Presque Isle.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's a lot of days in the month, and they so far have not been available on 2 of our dates in October, and we asked for this in September. So
I expect that I'll hear back tomorrow about the November 9th date. I would say that's probably 98% that they'll be there for that.
I hope so. Okay.
Yeah. Finance Director Brackett has still been working through the wastewater issues, and we still strongly believe this isn't a systematic billing issue. She can, every time she talks with each individual user about their bill, and we do have more bills going out, obviously, because it's another quarter that has come to pass. But every time she's talked to them, these users have had plumbers come out, discovered leaking toilets, or other issues that might have been inside the house that have led to the usage being high. We've also had several people that have put meters on their outside water faucets, which is a good thing. So that'll help them down the road. Some of those people had said that they had meters, but they forgot to do the meter reading and call it in. And then when they did the meter reading and called it in, then obviously their usage was decreased back to where it normally would be, or somewhere close. So we're still working through this, and we'll continue to work through it on a case-by-case basis. And I did want to say that I did receive, on the wastewater issue, I received another email today asking some questions about the wastewater issue. And I haven't had the time to answer all of the questions today, but I wanted to read those questions so that people are aware that these questions are out there and that I will be responding to them. I will respond to some of them tonight. So one of the questions was, what is the, and this refers to the inflow and infiltration problem that we've had. What is the dollar amount billed to Rockport for the previous 24 months to treat the wastewater sent for treatment that was a result of the inflow problem? We have most of the data there. I'm still waiting for Maine Water to give us a little bit more data so we can do that full analysis up to current. So I'll be able to have those exact numbers, and I'll provide those both to the emailer, and I can provide it in my next report as well, so that everybody that's listening will hear that as well. The next question was in relation again, is the total amount in question 1 billed to Rockport wastewater subscribers? So it is, because we will, the amount that is not billed directly to users based on usage is covered by all of the users, and that's part of the rate that's charged. So it is. And then the next question is relation to that, is that amount divided in equal parts amongst all subscribers? Yes, it's included in the usage rate. So all users are paying the same rate per cubic foot, and included in that is the expense for the treatment of the wastewater by Camden and Rockland that we budget for on an annual basis, when we budget for more than what we bill for. So I hope that explains that a little bit better for people. Another question was, what inflow issues have been discovered so far? When the basement inspections happened last summer into the fall, there were 11 violations that were found. Most of these were sump pumps and roof drains that were connected to the system, and therefore having water that was being sent into the system that obviously wasn't being accounted for on the other end with water coming in. There were also, and I don't have a number of this, but we found customers that were not being billed usage or debt service at all. So there were customers that were hooked up to the system that weren't being billed at all for anything.
The number I remember is 12 or 15, I think.
Yeah, it's in that range.
Yeah.
And some of those, were potentially large users, like the Camden Animal Hospital. So they were one of them that was connected that wasn't being billed for anything. So we have made some inroads into the infiltration and inflow problem, but there's obviously more work to do, and the camera ring work will be part of that as well. Any other questions on that before I move on?
I just wanted to, I've sort of been in touch with Scott Bickford over the meters, because Maine Water no longer provides the $25 meters. And Scott found a company in Maine to buy these meters from, and we ordered 2 of them for our condo association back in August, and we still haven't gotten them. I called the company yesterday, and they're still, it's going to be over 8 weeks to get those meters out, and he's got a whole bunch of them coming to Rockport. So sort of frustrating for our residents, but that's the status of those meters.
Well, it was frustrating from a perspective of staff too. We were under the impression that Maine Water was still making those meters available, and they didn't tell us otherwise. So when we first said that the meters were available, it wasn't true, but we didn't know that it wasn't true until we started asking. So.
Right, and then there wasn't a good, easy solution after that. You were sort of out in the free market, and now, obviously the irrigation season's over, so the meters, will be okay for next year, but.
Right, yeah. So. Last week, I did receive a comment about construction going on in the village, causing some issues and that it was unsettling for a resident in the village area. And that she was referring to obviously the library and especially the intersection, because there's been a lot of work with either CMP trucks there or consolidated communication trucks there. And just deliveries of materials, the cement trucks that are there. So there's been a lot more congestion at that intersection lately than there was throughout the rest of the project. And she also mentioned, that there's going to be more construction with the hotel. And I said, well, potentially there's going to be more construction with the hotel, but that's an improved project by the planning board. And then she mentioned the conceptual parking lot, if that was going to be under construction at the same time. So I just wanted to reiterate that is just in its initial phases. The board at your last meeting, as you know, just approved additional engineering and design work. So we're not anywhere near to a construction point for that conceptual parking lot. There are way too many issues that have to be resolved and looked at, designs, the geotechnical work that has to be done on the hillside. I know the board understands that, but I just want to put that out there so that everybody is aware that this isn't going to be, construction's not going to start tomorrow on any parking lot from the town's perspective. We're in the design and engineering phase, and we'll move forward as publicly as we can with that project. I mean, that's the goal anyway, is to get public feedback and information as we move forward. As I'm sure it's on everybody's minds, the absentee ballots for the November 3rd election. So as of this morning, the town clerk's office had processed about 1,200 absentee ballot requests. They did start going out in the mail last week when we received them from the state. She's already received about 300 returned ballots. We do have a secure drop slot at the town office for these ballots. So if people are concerned about mailing them, on the side door that faces the parking lot, there's a mail slot in the door. There's a secured box. We've built Public Works constructed a secured box on the back side of that to hold those ballots, and that gets checked routinely throughout the day and emptied by the town clerk. It was actually amazing how many ballots were in there this afternoon when she checked it. There was probably, I want to say 50 ballots that were in that secured box. We also have ordered I'm going to say the official ballot box from the state that will be placed at the front entrance of the town office. But those aren't expected to be here until around the 23rd of October. So, but we did get on the list to have one of those delivered as well.
And residents can return, is early voting the same as turning in your absentee ballot? Is there a
There is no such thing as early voting. I love this term in the state of Maine. There is no such thing.
I've just seen these signs, so
yes. Yeah, I have too.
Residents.
I have too, and I appreciate you asking that question because that's a very frustrating term for me, and I'm sure Linda would appreciate me saying there is no such thing as early voting in Maine. What we have is absentee voting, so you can vote in person by absentee ballot.
All the way up until November 3rd, not October 29th.
Correct. You can request ballots. So for other states, there is early voting where you see people on the news, you'll see people in lines, whatever. Well, in Maine, it's absentee voting, even if you're doing it in person. So if you come to the town office, for instance, and want to cast your ballot today or tomorrow, you ask for an absentee ballot and the clerks will ask you, do you want to take it with you or do you want to vote now? And if you choose to vote now, we'll direct you either into the town manager's conference room or into the Richardson room using the side entrance. And then you as a resident voter can fill out your ballot, put it in the envelope, sign the envelope, and then hand it into the town clerk or one of her staff. So that's our version, Maine's version of early voting.
And if you're concerned about that you're not getting your ballot by mail, if you're waiting and it's not coming, you can always just go into the town office and get a ballot and vote. Yep,
you can. And keep in mind, again, they are mailing them out just as quick as they possibly can. We've had. Sure.
No, it's not a criticism of anyone, but
no, absolutely. Reason,
you're entitled. You only can vote one ballot, but you can get another ballot to vote.
Yes, you can request another one if you haven't gotten it in the mail. But we have been telling people if you haven't got it you know, it takes 3 or 4 days generally from when you request it to get the ballot based on when you do. And if you do it on a Friday, you're obviously not going to get it until probably Tuesday or Wednesday the following week.
Yeah.
So the best way to do it, I feel, is just to do it in person, but that's me.
Yeah.
Only because it has to go to Portland before it comes back to
Exactly, exactly. But I just wanted to say that I'm watching what's happening at the town clerk's office. Keep in mind, taxes are also due this week. They are extremely busy. So anybody that's out there, please be patient when you come to the town office. We still only can have 3 people in the lobby at one time because of the pandemic. So if you have to wait outside, just dress appropriately, bring an umbrella, and be patient with them. They'll get to you and they'll move you through just as quick as they can. And I want to thank Linda and Shay and Wyatt, because they are incredibly slammed. And they have been for the last, all 3 of them probably for the last 2 weeks, and Linda even more than that. Linda's put in an inordinate number of hours, including this weekend and at nights. And actually, she's not watching this meeting tonight to take minutes. I've asked my executive assistant to do minutes because Linda's working at the town office on absentee ballot requests. So, but I really thank them for their work, because it's really amazing when you think about 1,200 ballots requests that they've brought in, and we have under 3,000 registered voters. So already, so just think about that.
Yeah.
Bill, is it appropriate to just mention why we have so many people on a ballot?
Yeah, I certainly can. So the budget, yes, the local ballot for the budget committee. When you look at your ballot, you'll notice that there's a huge number of selections or candidates, if you will. So back in August, when we had the annual town meeting, there was only one person that actually took out nomination papers for a budget committee position, and we had, I think, 3 space vacancies, 3 or 4.
4, I think, because we now still have 3.
Yeah,
Yeah.
3 or 4. Yeah.
So the way that the state laws are and the town charter is, there were several people. I think in total there was something like 30 people that received one write-in vote for a position on the budget committee. And so Linda did her best to, after seeking legal advice as to could she contact those people and see if they were interested in serving or not, she did her best to try to contact those individuals to find out if they were interested in serving on the budget committee. And she wasn't able to get in contact with all of them because she didn't have contact information for everybody. But she was able to reduce the number, but there's still a huge number of candidates on the ballot. And keeping in mind that some of them may not wish to serve, but if we could not get in touch with them, then they had to be listed on the ballot.
So just a question for curiosity's sake, some of the people you couldn't get in contact with, if they get the most popular vote, how do you get in contact with them then? I mean, if you can't do it now, you can't do it then, I would think.
Right, it'll be difficult.
It's not that hard to find people in Rockport, really.
Well, but no.
No,
I
I'm
mean,
not. I appreciate your comment, Mark. Yeah.
And keep in mind also that there was limited time between when we got our legal advice and when we had to order the ballots too, so that, she probably could have done more of a search like she would if somebody gets elected that we don't have contact information for. We can do a longer in-depth search to find contact information versus what we were able to do.
Check with the PD.
Yeah. And there's some things that there's some records that we can't use as well legally to be able to find people's contact information. So you have to keep that in mind as well.
No,
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
So yeah, I understand that there's some confusion out there about that. It was simply doing the best we can with what was given to us. And next time I would just encourage people that want to run for the budget committee to take out nomination papers and do it the regular routine instead of having to do it this way. I also wanted to thank all the volunteers over the last, I guess, week and a half, 2 weeks that took part in the Clean Up Rockport. I know it was spearheaded by a solid group of volunteers. their efforts certainly are appreciated, especially in today's world with the pandemic going on. So I certainly, I don't want to list any names because I know I'd leave somebody out because there was a huge group. So I do appreciate them doing that as well.
Do we know what the tonnage was this year?
I don't have any numbers. Last thing I wanted to update the board on, and you can see there's a lot of things that were added to the town manager's report from my written report from last week, but the infrastructure bond, the 2019 infrastructure bond sold last week, and it's a tiered rate that we received. So it starts out in the first year, the interest rate is 0.55% on that $1.632 million bond. And it increases in the 10th year to 1.52%. The average is around 1.1%, 1.08%, something like that. So definitely, yes, definitely a good time to be borrowing money. The highest amount of interest that the town will pay is in the first year because it's the highest amount, obviously, of the bond that's out there. And that's $7,700 for the year for interest on $1.632 million. So very good time for us to do that and get all that work done.
Yeah.
With that, that's all I have.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, Bill. So the next item is public input on non-agenda items. Do we have any?
Let me check my email. No, I do not.
Okay, so moving on, our amendments to the agenda. We're most of the way through the agenda, so I doubt that we have any amendments to it, but are there any?
But what I wonder, Deborah, is I do have a revision to the minutes, the September 8th minutes. Do we have to move?
We'll take it off the consent calendar then. We can do that when we get to the consent calendar then.
Okay.
Okay, anything else? Okay, so the next item is the consent agenda. If you would like to take the minutes off the consent agenda, we can do that.
I would like to take the minutes off the consent agenda. Sorry, Mark.
Sorry, Mark.
No,
That means there is no consent agenda. So, all right. So we'll just go ahead with the minutes. What comments did you have, Denise?
On page 3 of 7, under the Roman numeral 5, it says Vice Chair Munger stated that we never receive any information from the school. And I went back because that just didn't sound right to me. And I listened to the live stream. And what I said was that we did not have the usual annual presentation by the school district due to the pandemic. And I just wanted, I think to me, that's an important care. I didn't want to suggest that the school's hiding information from us. We just didn't have that usual annual presentation.
All right. Anything else?
That's it.
So if somebody wants to make a motion.
I move we approve the September 8th minutes as amended.
Second.
Any further discussion? All right. Denise,
Yes.
roll call. Michelle,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Okay. So next item on the agenda is action items, and we have several committee applications to act on, and sorry that this has taken a while, Rich Anderson, but you're first on the list. As you know, I'm the liaison on the the newly formed Economic Development Committee, and Rich has expressed interest in being on that committee, and he and I have met and talked about it, and I certainly recommend and fully support his being on the committee.
Great. Should we, do you want a motion or do you want to talk?
Why don't we go ahead and do these individually? So Denise, were you going to make?
I move the board appoint Richard Anderson to the Economic Development Committee for a term ending June 2023.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? Rich, I didn't give you an opportunity to say anything. Would you like to say anything?
That's okay.
If you'd like to say something, now's the time.
Real quickly, I was when David Pio approached me. I was really responsive immediately because I have a history that goes way back to probably the late '90s, and Roger Moody can tell you. I approached him, and when we founded the Camden, what's now called the Camden Areas Future Group, and so I've been involved with trying to get work with economic development way back then in Camden, and further, I've through my whole career have experienced, through starting and growing two companies, the impact that vital companies can have on both employees and the community. And in one of the companies that we grew to have 300 staff members with offices in Chicago, Boston, and St. Louis, and in both companies, we were engaging highly creative people, collaborating with national, state, and local government, schools, and businesses. So I've been engaged in this kind of activity. So I really was happy and looking forward to participating here. And my three children live here, and their children, and so I want to do what I can do to assure that our region continues to grow in its capacity to provide jobs, education, recreation, housing, to a dynamic mix of generations, different generations, and income levels, and try to make that happen. So I'm really eager to be a part of this. Thank you for considering it.
And Rich is also active on the Rotary and their efforts toward regional economic development. He knows a lot of people. He's very well connected in terms of, the region. And I think those are all valuable, also valuable assets to have on the committee.
Yeah, we had, just as a point of that, Deborah, that this Rotary effort that we're engaged in right now, we had about 20 visitors attending our listening to Bill Napower today, and they were from all the way from South Thomaston to Belfast and Rockland City Council members, and so I think it's a nice time when there's a number of people that are interested in doing this, and so I think that we can have a huge impact. Rockport's blessed by having space that many other communities don't have, and so I think we can play a real critical role in this regional effort.
Thanks, Rich. Any other comments? All right, so we have a first and second, correct? Yes.
Yep.
Denise?
Yes.
Michelle?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Thank you, Rich.
Thanks, Rich.
Thank you.
Okay, and the second and third items are related. Susan Kauk, is it? I'm sorry if I...
No, that's right.
Okay. She has asked to move from a regular member on the Parks and Beautification Committee to an alternate member position, leaving open a regular position slot. And Doug Cole has stepped up and asked and has volunteered and submitted an application to be appointed as a regular member on Parks and Beautification. And he's obviously been very active in that over the years. And that's great I think it's great to have him involved in that.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I was going to do the motion, but go
No,
ahead.
go ahead. No, then I'll ask a question.
Okay, I moved should we do those together or do those separate?
It's your motion either way. I mean, they're
Two different years though, so.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Let's not confuse ourselves.
Okay.
I move the board move Susan Kauk from regular member to alternate member to the Rockport Parks and Beautification Committee with a term ending June 30, 2022.
I'll second that.
Okay.
So now my question,
Yes.
don't we do these for 3 years, or is there a purpose this is only 2?
Yeah, she's just keeping her term. That's why.
Okay.
That way we don't have members that are expiring, more than a group of them.
Yep. No, thanks.
Okay. Is that it on discussion? All right. Call the question. Denise,
Yes.
Michelle,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
I vote yes. Okay, and the last one then is Doug Cole being his potential appointment to the Rockport Parks and Beautification Committee for a term ending in June 2023 as a regular member.
I move the board appoint Douglas Cole to the Rockport Parks and Beautification Committee for a term ending in June 2023.
Second. Okay. So, knowing how Doug feels strongly about being present during these things in order to get your appointment, you know, Doug, I'm a little disappointed.
Yeah, that's great.
I didn't send him the link because I didn't think the board needed to have an introduction.
No, it'll take less time if we do it this way.
He said he's watching for flies on us, so.
Yeah. So I take it that was a discussion. No further discussion? All right, call the question. Denise?
Yes.
Michelle?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
And I vote yes. All right. The next item is to act on general assistance ordinances appendices A to H. Bill, you have anything further you want to add on this?
I think we've covered it pretty well.
Okay.
I move the
I move-
board approve. Go ahead, Mark. Nope.
Go ahead, Mark.
I move the board approve the general assistance ordinance appendices A to H as presented.
Second.
That's okay. We have a
We're
second.
just in a hurry to get
Got
moving.
it a little bit before Michelle. All right, any further discussion? All right, Denise,
Yes.
Michelle,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
and I vote yes. All right. Next item on the agenda is to act on the property tax abatement for Midcoast Tech. Bill?
Yes, so this business used to be located at 534 West Street. They moved and opened in Belfast in 2018. So the current tax year was abated by the assessor. This abatement is for the 2 prior years, 2018 and 19. It must be abated by the board as their previous years and not current years. So the amounts are $170.50 plus interest for 2019 and $164.02 plus interest for 2018.
What is this personal tax? That's
Yes, personal property.
okay. So they still pay their real property tax if they own the building, I guess. I don't
If
know.
they own the building, yes, but right. This is just personal property.
Okay. So was it erroneously assessed because they'd already moved?
Yes,
Okay.
and it wasn't caught until this year for some reason.
Okay. I move the board approve tax abatement 09-2020 for Midcoast Tech in the amount of $170.50 plus interest for fiscal year 2019 and $164.02 plus interest for fiscal year 2018.
I'll second that.
Question.
Discussion, yes.
Why, I mean, it says 170.50 plus interest. Why don't we give the actual number and then say including interest? I mean, because what is the interest on each of these? It probably isn't much.
It's not much. We do it that way because when it gets processed, that way if there's a delay, when the board approves it and it gets processed, if there's a day or two delay, then we're not writing off, two.
I mean,
That's
if it was 300,000, I might be interested to know what the interest was, but
yeah, the interest isn't much. I mean, it's
nope.
a few dollars.
Okay, anything further? Denise,
Yes.
Michelle,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
and I vote yes. All right, so there are no discussion items, and that takes us to select board reports. Mark, do you have anything?
Budget committee met last week to elect the chair, vice chair, the same 2 people. We had a nice spirited, conversation. It's sort of what we've been aiming to do, is to without a lot of pressure, just sit down and talk about things in general, what has happened, where we are. Megan was quite instrumental in answering some questions to the committee that was there. My conservation and parks is coming. I missed conservation. I was out of state last week. Anyway, so that was it. The budget committee was the only one.
Okay, Michelle, do you have anything?
The West Rockport Fire Station Committee met last week to
That's
look at some initial, that's right, we missed you, Mark.
Well, I knew there was one I missed.
That's okay. To look at the initial drawings, I think there were four options that were presented and feedback was given. So certainly, a lot more work to do with that, but it was a great meeting to have and see what some of the initial plans are.
Great. Denise?
The Opera House Committee met last week, and they're working together with Drew and Bill on sort of a reopening plan for the Opera House, maybe some small, less than 40 people events. There's still some things that have to happen with the building in terms of plexiglass and making it sort of safe, but looking at the possibility of having some small, 1 to 3 performers and then a socially distanced audience. So that's sort of exciting to think about how we could do that safely. The other committees haven't met.
If I can just add on to what Denise said about that too, is that we'll be setting up an electronic ticketing connection for the Opera House so that we'll be able to do electronic tickets. So they'll be hands-free so people can order them online direct from the website or a link through the website. And then those will be scanned when they come in instead of being exchanged, if you will, so that we're trying to limit as much as we possibly can with, physical interactions between audience members and staff when it comes to reopening the Opera House. So we are hopeful that we can get this. Drew has already reached out to some performers, and some performers that he's talked to have just real hesitant about performing. So we wanted to do it in October. We'll do it as soon as we possibly can get performers lined up and get the safety measures in place here at the Opera House.
Okay, so there was an RES redevelopment task force meeting a few days ago, and we kind of debriefed on Terry Dewan's presentation to the select board and to the task force. I would say that the biggest things that kind of came out of that meeting were the fact that there's really not a lot of availability out there in terms of contractors and perhaps interest at this point on the RES. I mean, there's just, there's so many unknowns, obviously. And so it's not necessarily a great time to be doing that. We do also think that there probably needs to be a little bit more meat to the bones that needs to be added to the RFQ. Some people suggested that, we should do more of a master plan, given that there's probably not a lot of people, clamoring out there anyway. We have time to do these things. We talked about how it would be very interesting, helpful to do perhaps some surveys of, asking some residents some interesting questions that we would take into consideration some proposed master plan. And those surveys could probably be done, and I assume that you agree with this, Bill, that they could be included, a survey, a few short questions could be included in like whatever mailer we do for the, not mailer, but the newsletter. When we do the newsletter, we could include that with it. So it would be an effective but inexpensive way for us to try to get some feedback from residents. So we're talking about trying to do that. We talked about how there's not any, or I pointed out there's not any money in the budget for us to be hiring consultants, et cetera, at this point to be engaged in doing master plans for us. I'm not sure that with everything else we have going on that this is exactly the time for it. We also noted that, with the Economic Development Committee, we don't want to be informed. We don't want to duplicate anything that they're going to, be working on as well. Also, we have Brian Dancause with McHead, who brings some more skills to the table, and information to the table, so we can utilize him. Bill is going to put together for the task force some of that work we had done at the Opera House, where we had that workshop a year or so ago. I think that was that's probably, there's one thing I'd like to mention, and that was that it was observed by Martin Cates. As you recall, he's a real estate, a really experienced real estate professional in the area that's on the task force. And he observed that the most frequent question being asked by people coming to the area with, real estate going kind of nutso right now is broadband capabilities, which is really interesting because that's the first time we've been hearing that. I remember a couple of years ago, people said, oh, no one ever, a real estate person had told us, no one ever asked about broadband, which I found kind of hard to believe, but he said that that's the number one question being asked.
I'll echo that, Deborah, because I know of a gentleman on Hope Street that has $1 million home that showed it 2 or 3 weeks ago. And that was one of the questions that was asked of them. And another person that has $1 million plus home remote from the village or any real main road, that type of question was posed to them. So it is something that people are inquiring about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the driver, for the real estate market is a lot of people who are able to work remotely now.
Right. Right.
But they need really good broadband access.
Really good and really reliable broadband access, which is, what we've had here at this house and needed, and was a major factor in us, relocating full time here a number of years ago. And that's a good thing that we have the 1 gig capacity, the town's capacity there at the RES site. That's a good thing for the RES site. Very important. So anyway, that kind of catches you up, I think, on that general discussion. I am working with the Camden Rockport Broadband Task Force. I have to say that I've been sort of holding up the documents a little bit. There's some reason for that I wouldn't want to discuss here, but I'll keep you informed of that as we go. Nothing's been really going on the Midcoast solid waste. We had we postponed our meeting. Canceled our meeting this month. We're going to have one. Our next one is October. I guess it was the September one that was canceled. We did have a governance committee meeting, but the regular meeting was canceled because partially, as you know, David Barrows had a tragic accident and died. Lincolnville board member and member of our Midcoast Transfer Station board.
Mm-hmm. Deborah, and I know this isn't probably the appropriate place, but with the housing market going crazy and having all this land that we have in Rockport that isn't really generating tax revenue for the town, are there subdivision developers who?
There are some discussions that some people are having, as I understand it, behind the scenes. And actually, to tell you the truth, I found out some of that information from Richard Anderson, who seems to be, plugged into some of that, which is again why I think he's going to be valuable on the Economic Development Committee. But I know that that's something that the Economic Development Committee wants to feel. The two people who are on it, they feel that that's an important thing to have their have their finger on the pulse of. Yes, I think that now ramping up that committee will ramp up those efforts to maybe encourage some of those things, which will also have the hopefully added advantage of creating some additional sewer possibilities for sewer users for us as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's all I had. Anything else on committees, Bill or anybody? Okay. All right. So the next item is executive session.
Move the board convene an executive session for discussion of personnel matter pursuant to 1 MRS section 405-6A.
I'll second that.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor, Denise?
Yes.
Michelle,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Bill, do we just stay on, or do we have
Just-
another? We just
No,
stay
you can stay on. We're just gonna wait for him to shut down the live stream.